I just want to officially, my name is Nora Collins. I'm the Director of Campaigns and Creation Care for the Franciscan Action Network. So on behalf of the entire Franciscan family, our institutional members, our colleges, our Franciscan Justice Circles, and our staff from across the country, 20,000 strong, we just want to extend a warm and hearty welcome to you and to our speakers and panelists tonight. Um, I am going to start us off with the necessary housekeeping tips. You always have to do some small housekeeping before we get into the meat of tonight's session. Again, thanks for joining. We are going to soon shut down that chat feature, but instead we invite you to please now open the Q&A feature, the question and answer feature there in red. And at any point during the evening, go ahead and enter your questions, and they will be available to Maya von Rossum for the question and answer session. If you can't find it, click the More button and look for that Q&A. And finally, the closed captioning feature is available if you should need it. As always, we begin in prayer. So I'm going to invite Michelle Dunn, our Executive Director, to please open us in prayer.
Nora, I believe we have Sister Kara with us, and I'd like to invite Sister Kara to give the opening prayer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. God of blessings, the universe sings of your glory. Deepen our gratitude for all you have made, and awaken in us a renewed commitment to care for the earth and each other. We pray for the oceans, air, mountains, plants, and soil, that life and health may again pulse in them. Forgive us for our environmental irresponsibility, for the damage caused by our greed and ignorance. Heal the earth from pollution and waste. Breathe into us solidarity with all who suffer from environmental neglect, and fill us with compassion for creation. Move us into action to build a sustainable Mother Earth, and to make choices that honor you by preserving its beauty and resources. Inspire leaders with openness to listen to those most affected by climate change, and with the courage to act urgently and wisely, so that our common home may be healed and restored, and all people, future generations, and all creatures may thrive in a clean and healthy environment. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Kara.
You're welcome.
Beginning our time together with a beautiful prayer. I'm Sister Louise Lears, and it's my privilege to work with the Franciscan Action Network on issues of environmental justice. And we are delighted that you are joining us for this second in a series of 3 webinars on the right to a clean and healthy environment. I'm going to repeat those last words again, the right to a clean and healthy environment. The first webinar in our series focused on the global right to a clean and healthy environment, as defined by the United Nations, upheld by the International Court of Justice, and uplifted by Franciscan communities all over the globe. Our webinar tonight focuses on Green Amendments for the Generations, which seeks to add the right to a clean and healthy environment to the state constitution of every state in the United States. Our third webinar will be on January 27th in the new year, 2026, and it will focus on practical strategies for Franciscans to help advance green amendments in states where there's already some traction. Let me give you an idea of how we'll proceed in the next hour. First, my colleague Nora Collins will give a sense of what's happening on the federal level that makes the passage of green amendments even more important. Then we'll learn everything we need to know about green amendments from Maya van Rossum, the founder and passionate advocate for the Green Amendments movement. Following Maya's presentation, my colleague Nora will join us again for a conversation with Maya based on the questions you enter in the Q&A. And remember to enter your questions into the Q&A at any time during the webinar. And we'll close our time together, as we always do, with prayer. So Nora, we turn to you for a sense of context. What's happening on the federal level?
Thank you, Sister Louise. Great. Again, my gratitude to all of you. And indeed, as Sister Louise mentioned, we think it's so important before we turn to the critical work at the state level to kind of give an overview of what is indeed happening at the federal level. Next slide. You know, we are a year into this administration. And the question before us is, where do we continue to seek to have influence and be effective as a Franciscan family, as the Franciscan Action Network? It's a very critical question. Amidst all of the fury of things happening at the federal level, to all of the policy areas that we care about, poverty assistance, affordable housing, immigration, the environment, it's good to be reminded of what the landscape is, what the state of play is, so we can make some decisions on where we can seek to have influence. And therefore also reaffirm the equally important work of turning perhaps in a few states to the work of the Green Amendments movement, in a few states where we also think we might have impact. So in an effort to kind of paint that picture of what's happening at the federal level, I just want to look at three critical areas that this administration, that is part of this administration's agenda. The first is deregulation. The second, unleashing American energy, or what this administration calls energy dominance. And also kind of what undergirds the other two and relates to the other two, which is a campaign of climate denial. So let us turn to each of these three issues very, very quickly and kind of look at how that paints the landscape for us to enter and seek to have influence. Next slide. Okay. We all remember Inauguration Day almost a year ago, January 20th, 2025. This I took from the Brookings Institution. It really has a very, very good listing of all the deregulatory actions or regulatory changes in this second administration of Donald Trump. And so it kind of, in reverse chronological order, kind of lists all of the deregulatory actions in all those areas that we care about. And why do we start with this initial point? The initial point is that there's deregulatory actions across the administration in all of the departments: Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of the Interior. So there's tons of deregulatory actions. And you'll remember right after inauguration, a number of executive orders were issued in rapid succession. I want to point to just two primarily and also a third. On Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2025, the administration and the current president signed an executive order withdrawing the United States from the Paris Agreement. And you know well that the Paris Agreement is a decade-old agreement among 200 countries to hold climate at 1.5 degrees of warming Celsius. So in an effort to kind of hold that, it was an effort to kind of roll back fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. So on day one, moments after inauguration, we announced an executive order to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. That same day, the current administration signed a second executive order unleashing American energy. And obviously, you can see the connection there between withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and unleashing American energy, specifically gas, oil, and coal, right? 2 days later, we saw an executive order which is a repeal of a Biden-era executive order about strengthening national forests. So that order was signed by Biden on Earth Day 2022, and it was repealed day one by this administration. So from there, you see a succession of executive orders, deregulatory orders in multiple of the areas that we care about, but very acutely within the environmental sector. Next slide. I want to kind of start with this slide as well, because so those executive orders, day one of this administration, 2 months later, March 12th, 2025, the Environmental Protection Agency releases a press release. The EPA launches biggest deregulatory action in U.S. history. Administrator Administrator Lee Zeldin, announces 31 historic actions to power the great American comeback. Okay. And so this 2-minute video that is still on the EPA's website prominently features, a minute into it, what the administrator calls the soon to announce the repeal of what Zeldin calls the, quote, holy grail of the climate change religion. And that is the endangerment finding. Next slide. The language of that repeal that came in July, so this litany of repeals that were promised on day one of inauguration, that were listed, the 31 that were listed on the EPA's press release in March, we saw a very significant one, the Holy Grail of repeals, announced in July. EPA releases proposal to rescind Obama-era endangerment finding, regulations that pave the way for electric vehicle mandates, and more, right? And the language here is really critical because it talks about saving more than $54 billion annually. So this idea of unleashing American energy, of deregulation, is ultimately about saving money. And we also have to ask ourselves, what else is behind this? Next slide. I'm proud, and I want to thank our Franciscan Action Network, because we boldly, almost immediately, requested signatures on a joint comment that would immediately go into the Environmental Protection Agency on this proposed repeal of the endangerment finding, which allows us to claim that our human health has been damaged by greenhouse gases, that there's a connection between human health and greenhouse gas emissions, thus allowing the federal government to limit greenhouse gases. We immediately surged FAN and 9 of our Catholic partners, Network, Marinol, Catholic Climate Covenant, Laudato Si movement, et cetera. We launched an effort to bring in a joint Catholic comment to the EPA. And on the day that we hand delivered those 4,500 comments, Catholic comments, to the EPA, we were joined by Dayenu, a Jewish call to climate action. So what we're seeing here is a change in how the faith community is really engaging on the environmental issue, which is not just facing towards Congress, but actually also facing heavily and increasingly so towards the U.S. administration, to kind of stand up against the repeal of very critical climate protections from previous administrations. So I want to thank our network for showing up in this important way, and there will be more of that. Next slide. The other thing that we're seeing is also Congress standing up to kind of react to these 31 proposed rescissions and repeals of important environmental policy. We also issued an alert to support this congressional action, which is the Roadless Area Conservation Act. On day 2 of the current administration, January 22nd, and the repeal of the Biden protection for our forests, then there was many months later, the repeal of actually the roadless rule. Congress responded to that repeal and issued the Roadless Area Conservation Act, both in the Senate and the House. There's companion bills. We have an active alert asking our network to get in letters into Congress to see a congressional response to reinstate those protections at the congressional level and not just at the policy level within the administration. So the faith community is showing up, and even now, too, Congress is seeking to further legalize some of those protections into congressional actions and not just as policy within the administration. Next slide. Want to thank our network there too. I did want to just kind of highlight this impressive letter from the U.S. Bishops' Conference, that holy grail of the endangerment finding and a companion repeal of greenhouse gas vehicle standards. So those companion actions from the administration to repeal both the endangerment finding and the greenhouse gas vehicle standards. The U.S. bishops wrote, if you can believe it, a 15-page, it's kind of a hefty, beautiful statement about those two related rescissions from the Environmental Protection Agency. So I just want to highlight this for you. It's available to you if you want to read it and see the connection, at least coming out of the U.S. bishops, of the problematic nature of these repeals and as it relates to our faith. Next slide. So as you see, day one, two most significant executive orders around the Paris Agreement, and then following in March, a list of 31 other proposed rescissions and repeals, and the faith community's response to that. Really, what we ask ourselves, what is at the heart of those deregulatory actions? And it's really, in the words of the administration on day one, it's about unleashing that executive order, unleashing American energy or American energy dominance. Next slide. So just quickly, to go hand in hand with the deregulatory actions, there was also a massive cut to clean energy tax incentives and funding in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was signed by the president on the 4th of July. Among many other things, this is a piece from the Council on Foreign Relations. Congress's One Big Beautiful Bill will shrink renewable energy investments, yet some technologies are preserved. So many months later, we are seeing how that's playing out. But what we can be sure is that the One Big Beautiful Bill largely rescinds and takes back investments under the previous administration, the Biden administration, in the Inflation Reduction Act to heavily invest into clean energy. It was an attempt to launch us into a 10-year path of investment. And here we are in year 3 of that Inflation Reduction Act, clean energy investments. And we're seeing that pulled back again in the name of American energy dominance. Next slide. Just before Thanksgiving, just two quick more statements, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Right before Thanksgiving, you'll also remember that was the same week the Department of Justice released the Epstein files, and the president signed that release. There were 3 very significant actions and rescissions in the name of American energy dominance. One was the announcement to open up tens of millions of acres of our coastlines to gas and oil leasing. Next slide. So an article from the New York Times from that same week. In 1 week, Trump moves to reshape U.S. environmental policy, and really in 3 significant ways, 3 significant executive orders and rescissions, et cetera. One was that offshore drilling, like we mentioned, but also around the Clean Water Act, around the interior waterways of our country, and the Endangered Species Act, right? Next slide. So our faith community signed, Creation Justice Ministries and the National Partnership for the Environment took lead on these sign-on letters, which FAN has signed. One, again, on the offshore leasing program. the second on the clean water, and third on endangered species. FAN has signed on to these letters and they'll go into the administration. But we are going to ask all of you to be part of an effort to get in an official statement to the Department of the Interior on the offshore drilling. Next slide. So soon after we end, in the next couple of days, we're going to get up this effort to collect your signatures to stand for the gospel, to stand for care of creation, and calling on our Franciscan hearts and values to say there's another way. And so we want to get in a statement into the Department of the Interior on the opening up of our coastlines to drilling. And so stay tuned on that. I just really want to thank all of you for allowing me these couple minutes to paint the national landscape of what's happening. Again, it's deregulation as a value in and of itself, but certainly in the environmental sector to unleash American energy dominance. And so FAN is continuing daily to along with our faith-based partners and colleagues in Washington to kind of find effective ways to advocate for our creation. And we continue to be grateful and invite you into that work at the federal level. But tonight, we are just delighted to also look at the equally important work ahead of us to, in where it's possible, to focus at the state level on the Green Amendments movement. And we are hoping to be fully supportive to our network in both spaces. And I invite my colleague, Louise Lears, to kind of kick us off. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. That's really helpful in understanding the importance of the Green Amendments at this particular time. And so we welcome Maya Van Rossum, the founder and passionate advocate of the Green Amendments for the Generations movement. Maya is an author, an attorney, a community organizer, incredible coalition builder. She's been focused and featured in major news outlets and has testified by invitation before congressional committees. And she founded the Environmental Law Clinic at Temple University's Beasley School of Law. The list of honors goes on, but let's hear from Maya herself, founder of the Green Amendments for the Generations movement. Maya, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Louise, for that kind introduction, and Nora for that opening. It really is truly a joy and an honor to be here. I also want to recognize one person in the audience, Linda Lizakowski. I have had the joy of working with Linda in a variety of different spheres throughout my years of advocacy. So, Linda, I saw your name and I wanted to give a shout out to you. I am going to share my screen and try to take you through a little bit of the Green Amendment movement, which is why we're here to talk. But first, I did just want to, Louise gave a very kind introduction, but the thing I really want you to know about me is that I have been an environmental activist, leader, and attorney for over 30 years now, and it's as a result of that 30 plus years of legal action and advocacy and experiencing the myriad of ways our current system of environmental protection laws here in the United States of America fundamentally fail us, that I have come to this place of recognizing that we need a new powerful pathway for protection. The actual founding of the Green Amendment movement is not part of today's talk, but it is an outgrowth of that over 30 years of work. I think we just don't need to dive in, but to recognize that I think we all know that across our nation, people are experiencing the ravages of environmental pollution, degradation, and harm, right? They're breathing polluted air, drinking contaminated water, being exposed to toxic sites. We're facing a devastating climate crisis, and species of all kinds are being brought to the brink and over the edge of extinction because of the actions and activities of people. And often, when we recognize this, when people experience these harms in their communities, they ask the question, how is it possible that this is happening? How do we have communities across our nation, across our state, across our communities that are suffering so from environmental desecration? Don't we have a wealth of environmental protection laws and regulations, policies and programs and agencies that are all focused on protecting our environment and therefore protecting our communities? So how is it possible that we're experiencing all of this harm when we have supposedly all of these protections in place? And yes, I acknowledge as an attorney, we have literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of environmental protection laws at the local level, the state level, and the national level here in the United States of America. But we are still suffering these devastating harms. And that's because fundamentally, the way this system of laws is written, it has the wrong orientation. When we look at this system of laws and governance when it comes to the environment in any state here in the United States of America or at the national level, what we see is that by their own terms, these laws are really focused on legalizing and managing environmental pollution, degradation, and harm. And therefore, the agencies that are implementing those laws are also focused on managing harm. We do not have a system of laws and governance and agencies that are focused on prevention of pollution, degradation, and harm to our environment, right? It's about managing, it's about legalizing. You get the right reviews and the right permits from the right agencies, go forth and desecrate. This system of laws suffers from a lot of gaps and loopholes. There are a lot of things that simply are not regulated. If we think about PFAS, right, that man-made family of chemicals known as forever chemicals that are now proliferating throughout our environments, throughout our bodies, one of the reasons why PFAS is so prolific in the United States and frankly around the world is because it has been utilized, it's been manufactured and utilized in it for years when and where there has been an absence of legislation and regulation, no federal legislation or regulation, no state legislation or regulation that has been stopping the prolific use of PFAS. And that's why people are suffering at such high levels. We've got loopholes, for example, for the fracking industry intentionally written in to our laws that allows that industry as well as so many others to evade regulation. In this US system of laws and regulations, environmental racism is literally built in. It's not by happenstance that communities of color and low-income communities and indigenous communities suffer higher levels of environmental pollution, degradation, and harm. It actually is happening very intentionally in the way our US system of laws are written, interpreted, and applied. And in this system, as we all know, industry has much greater access to the levers of power than we, the regular people. And so they are actually helping to write these laws, to interpret these laws, to interpret how, when, and where these laws will be enforced or not enforced. And so they really perpetuate and grow the disparities and the limitations of this system of laws. And of course, now, as Nora has so well laid out, we have a new sense of urgency because even the basic level of protections that have been in place under federal law for years and years and years that so many of us have fought so hard for are now being stripped away. And people are being left bare to the ravages of increasing pollution and harm. And so people want to know, what do we do? In the face of all of this, what do we do? And my answer is we do everything, right? Everything that we're already doing, we have to continue to do. We have to organize and advocate and educate and protest and testify and litigate. And yes, we have to vote. We have to vote good people into office who truly care about our environment. But we have to do something more than that as well, right? Recognizing that doing all of this work under a system of laws that is focused on legalizing and managing pollution, degradation, and harm in the final analysis, even if all of these laws are implemented exactly as written because of all of this good work, we are still going to have people suffering from harm. And so there's something more that we have to do. We have to actually transform our system of law and governance in a very fundamental and important way. We have to transform our system of law and governance so that we give our rights as people to clean and healthy water, air, climate, and soils, flora, fauna, ecosystems, and environments, that we give these inalienable human rights to a clean, safe, and healthy environment the same highest quality of protection that we give to the other freedoms, cherished freedoms that we hold dear. We all know how powerfully the right to free speech, freedom of religion, private property rights, the right to freedom of assembly are protected under our state and federal constitutions, under our current system of laws and governance. We have to give that same quality of protection to our environment and to our environmental rights. And so how do we do that? Well, if you want to give highest protection to our environmental rights in the same way we give highest protection to our other cherished freedoms, not just any language anywhere in our system of laws will accomplish the job. We actually need to put in place constitutional green amendments. Constitutional green amendments that will give this highest recognition and protection to our environmental rights. Green amendments are a special kind of environmental rights amendment that are placed into the Declaration of Rights section of our constitutions and use carefully crafted language that give our environmental rights that same quality of protection we give to those other cherished freedoms. A green amendment, right, is not just a cookie cutter amendment. Not all green amendments are the same, right? There are certain criteria that I have identified that if you have constitutional language that meets these criteria, you will be giving highest recognition and protection to our environmental rights. But you can't just use the same language everywhere in every state constitution across our nation, because all of our states and all of our communities are different. All of our states have different priorities and different communities and different experiences. They have different kinds of ecosystems. They have different pre-existing systems of law that have to be recognized. So a green amendment is a constitutional provision that is an environmental rights amendment, but it's an environmental rights amendment that meets this carefully identified set of criteria that I have found in the constitutional amendments that have truly made a difference when it comes to protecting our environment and our environmental rights. And I just want you to know that on the left side of your screen, that's a Christmas cookie house. And on the right side of the screen, that's a Christmas cookie castle. And I made both of them. One for my daughter, that's actually my daughter in the picture, and one for my son. And they're totally edible, very yummy, but very different, at least in the minds and the hearts of the children that were experiencing them, much like a green amendment. So what happens if we put into our state constitutions the kind and quality of constitutional language that I'm talking about? What do we actually accomplish? Well, we accomplish a lot. We do truly give highest legal standing under U.S. law to our environmental rights. We place our environmental rights on par with those other cherished freedoms. We ensure that all government officials at all levels of government, from the state legislature to the governor's office to the attorney general's office, all the way down to the local town council, we ensure that all government officials within a state are protecting the environmental rights of all the people of the state. The water, the air, the climate, the soils, again, the flora, the fauna, the ecosystems, and the environments. All levels of government become constitutionally obligated to protect the environmental rights, again, of all the people. And they have to protect these rights equitably. No longer can you consistently sacrifice communities of color, indigenous communities, and low-income communities over and over and over to higher levels of pollution, degradation, and harm under the excuse that you're protecting someone else somewhere else, usually someone who's whiter, richer, and or more politically connected. No longer is that allowed. Now all government officials are constitutionally obliged to give equitable protection to our environmental rights. And they have to protect the environmental rights of the generations who are here today and the generations yet to be born. With a green amendment in place, protecting our climate does not just become something we hope for, we wish for, we advocate for. It becomes an actual constitutional mandate. We create a clear obligation on all government officials to protect the natural resources of the state for who? We, the people. They're not protecting the natural resources in order to advance politics or profits or industry goals. They are obliged to protect the natural resources of the state for the benefit of the people as their primary priority. When we put in place green amendments, we do truly transform the legal landscape. We do reorient government so it is focused on prevention of pollution, degradation, and harm first. We ensure that all of the laws that are already on the books are interpreted more firmly, more strongly, and are enforced more effectively. We create a foundation for new needed protections. And we also address the gaps and the loopholes and the deficiencies in the existing laws. Because if you do not have a law to address a critical environmental issue of concern, then we, the people, can turn to our constitutional right to clean water and clean air, a safe climate, and a healthy environment as the legal tool that we utilize to address that deficiency. And when our laws fundamentally fail to protect us, when our governments, when our agencies fundamentally fail to protect us and protect our environmental rights, with a green amendment in place, we, the people, can actually bring legal action to try to challenge and address that fundamental failing. And it's not just about transforming the legal landscape. It's also about empowering advocacy and activism and activists. Because now when we, the people, go forth to advocate for the people and the earth we love, we are not just advocating for the people and the earth we love. We are advocating for a constitutional entitlement, a constitutional right that legally belongs to us. Right? So we have the power of the Constitution in addition to the power of our conviction in our advocating for our human inalienable rights to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. And having that constitutional, that enforceable legal constitutional power behind that advocacy is incredibly important. It is legally important, but it is also intellectually important and emotionally important for activists and advocates. It really is empowering to know that you are stepping up, not just fighting for something you hope somebody else will care about, but that you are stepping up to fight for an actual right that belongs to you by virtue of the Constitution. This Green Amendment movement is a national movement, but that's starting at the state level. We are going state by state by state, seeking and securing the passage of constitutional green amendments into the Bill of Rights section of our state constitutions. And then ultimately, when we reach the right tipping point, we will also be fighting for a federal green amendment because we need them both. Under US law, there is a very intentional division of labor between the federal government and the state government. The way it goes is the federal government sets the floor, the base level of protection, but the states are allowed to do more. They're allowed to do better when it comes to protecting the environment. As long as they're meeting the floor of the federal government, they can provide a greater, better level of protection for the environment, right? And so what we are doing is we're not just hoping that our states grab hold of that power to do better when it comes to the environment. By virtue of the constitutional mandate we're putting in place in our state constitutions, we're making clear to our state government officials that they must do better. And every time we get a green amendment passed and enforced in a state, we provide a higher and better quality of protection within that state, therefore for others in our nation, but we also raise the level of expectation and we inspire other states to go forth and do this work. And then eventually we will get to the right tipping point to pursue our federal Green Amendment. At this point, this is where our Green Amendment movement stands. We have Green Amendments in 3 states already, Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, with proposals put forth in over 20 other states and more than half a dozen on the way. This is the landscape that we're working with currently. In the final analysis, I just want to acknowledge that we are in a historic moment when it comes to our democracy, right? Our democracy is under assault and our environment is under assault, but we can choose to grab hold of our democracy and use it to amend our state and federal constitutions in order to choose to make powerful and meaningful progress when it comes to our environment. We don't have to sit down, shut up, and take it. We can use our democracy to make powerful and meaningful change at this critical moment and truly leave a legacy of protection that will be embraced and revered for years to come. So hopefully, many of the fan circles will be inspired to join our Green Amendment movement, and I'll have the joy of working with all of you.
Incredible, Maya. Louise called you passionate, but I think that word is only half true. You're well beyond passion. And beyond thanking you for that tremendous presentation. I mean, on behalf of the Franciscan family, thank you for your decades of work that make our entrance into supporting you in the movement, and the history of this movement possible, right? We're entering into the history of your good work. And so thank you. Thank you so much. And we're thrilled. The purpose of the previous webinar, this webinar, and moving into the January webinar is to excite passion. Thanks for that. And to look for opportunities to invest in the states where we think it's possible, where we have a network to support it. I'd like to open with my own comment, which is kind of my mind opening up that at the federal level, as the baseline, thinking about it as regulating harm and moving into doing no harm, which is just a tremendous frame. Thank you. A question from Beth, an excellent one, I think. Would the Green Amendment require corporate management to account for environmental consequences over shareholder rights to profit?
Yeah. So the thing about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution particularly is it applies to the government and to government action. So the way we're going to get to corporate harm or industry harm to our environment is by addressing the government actions and permissions that allow that harm to take place, right? And so when industries go forth and devastate our environment, pollute or contaminate our environment, they do it pursuant to a law, a regulation, a permit that allows it. And if we have determined that that law, regulation, or permit is going to result in so much environmental devastation that it's going to fringe on the environmental rights of the people, we can then try to use the Constitution to challenge that bad action, to challenge that law, that regulation, or that permit. And if we are victorious, that government action becomes unconstitutional, and that responding corporate action is no longer allowed to happen. So we're not going to hold the corporations directly accountable through shareholders and pricing and their own corporate philosophy. But what we are going to do is deny them the government permissions and platform they need to inflict that devastating harm.
Thank you. Aaron asks the question, and I'd like to kind of expand it even more, a very specific question. Who is leading this movement in California? But rather than, you can answer that as well. But rather than that, can you talk about the variety of leadership in the states across the country, please?
Yeah. So in every single state, the Green Amendment movement is advancing differently. And sort of its beginnings come from a different place. Sometimes it's a person who heard a talk like this and called me, or heard a podcast, or read my book, The Green Amendment, and literally called me and they said, I want to make this happen in my state. And we worked together to figure out how to make it happen. Sometimes it's an organization or a legislator who was inspired to advance the movement, and we started to work together. So the truth is, in every state, there's a different collective that is really taking on that leadership responsibility and role. But fundamentally, it's always about good government actors complemented by good grassroots actors, and that's really where the fan circles can come into place. We're hoping that some of you will be inspired to want to become part of the leadership team in the varying states where the Green Amendment movement is advancing, and through that work together, I will be putting you in connection with whoever is taking on that leadership role in the state where you want to engage.
Yes, that's something we say often is fan shows up, right? We want to show up for the frontline people that are doing the important work, and show up for you, Maya. I think this is a really good question. So 3 states have these constitutional rights. So so what does it look like in the states that do not have those constitutional rights, but have some movement in that direction and some laws in that direction? Do we seek to bump those, clean air protections or clean water protections up to the next level? I mean, how does that practically look to kind of move it into the next level?
Yeah. So every state has environmental protection laws, right? They're all a little bit different. Some are better than others, but they all have them. The thing is, they all suffer from the same kind of deficiencies that I talked about. They're all being interpreted and applied by people with their own political agendas. Sometimes their agendas are stronger, sometimes they're weaker. I mean, but the long and the short of it is, even if you apply every single law exactly as it's written, we're going to have serious and significant harm, no matter how good the law is. And that's for the myriad of reasons, the way our system of laws work. But what we accomplish with a Green Amendment, right? The Constitution is above all the laws. So when we put in place this constitutional right of the people to a clean, safe, and healthy environment, and this duty on government officials to protect the state's natural resources for the benefit of present and future generations, what we are doing is raising the bar on everything that has already happened in the state in the past and everything that must happen in the state in the future. So all of those existing laws where there is a place and space for interpretation by government officials, that interpretation must now be through the lens of how do I interpret and apply this law in a way that will protect the environmental rights of the people. When you have a gap in the law where there is no law that's going to address a serious issue of harm, now people can grab a hold again of that constitutional right to clean water, to challenge that failure of government to act to protect or address that critical issue. So the Constitution becomes the gap filler, right? When new and emerging contaminants come on the scene, or industries where there yet is no law in place, again, people can turn to the Constitution. So what we do, we can certainly, and we should continue to fight for better laws and regulations and policies and programs that, that strengthens certain areas of law in really helpful ways. But by putting in place this constitutional entitlement, we literally lift all boats across the board. We strengthen what we have, and we create a foundation where there's a gap and there's still something that's needed. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you, Maya. We have people among our Franciscan family and our network from across the country, and you mentioned the 3 states. I think you mentioned 12 states that have a chance for a Green Amendment. The question is, which states, in fact, do have the highest chance of getting a Green Amendment at this time?
So again, we have 3 states that have it, and there we're enforcing it through advocacy and litigation. Over 20 states, I think it's about 23 states where they're proposed, and about half a dozen that are on the way. And I'm not going to be the predictor of where we have the best chance, because the truth is, every year, if there has been a Green Amendment effort that's been ongoing, certainly there's a foundation from which to build. But the truth is, all of our green amendments are going through through the legislative process first. So when you want to put in place a green amendment, there are three potential pathways. Not every state has every pathway. You can do a constitutional convention, which means the whole Constitution gets reopened. Once every 20 years or so, states can do that. And during that process, maybe you can add amendment. Nobody wants to do that. You could have a petition initiative where the people can go forth, and as long as they get the requisite number of signatures using the right process, they can actually be responsible for getting a green amendment proposal put on the general ballot for people to vote on. And that's available in about half the states, not quite, but not everywhere, but that's available in about half. In every state, there's a legislative pathway where the amendment gets put forth by the legislators. It has to get through both legislative houses once or twice by a varying number of votes, and then it goes before the people. Right now, every state is pursuing the legislative pathway except for Florida and Oregon, where they're doing legislative and petition initiative. And now I forgot why I was telling you that, but it was for a really good reason. So I'm just going to stop, and Nora, maybe you can remind me of the question.
No, we were asked a specific question to say where, because our network saying, well,
oh, where? Yes.
My state.
Yes. Yeah. So as a result, through the legislative path, every legislative session is kind of a fresh start and becomes a new opportunity. You get the right grassroots activism with the right legislative champions, and you can make magic. And so it really is, every year is a new, fresh, different opportunity. And I don't want to be the predictor of winners and losers, because I think everybody should all win in 2026.
I like that. Maya, I think we have time for one more question. We've had a number of very good questions come in, and we'll think of other ways to get answers out to folks. But I think this is a really high note to end on. Can you think of a story that's super encouraging to you and to this movement? Can you provide some specific examples of how green amendments have been utilized to protect our environment in the states that currently have them incorporated into state constitutions? So an encouraging how it's been effective.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a list. Listen hard, or get the book, or go to the website. But there have been many powerful accomplishments that could not have been achieved but for a green amendment. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where fracking was already advancing, the Pennsylvania legislature in 2012 passed a piece of legislation written by the fossil fuel industry that would have made things exponentially worse. It mandated that drilling and fracking operations be allowed to happen in the heart of residential communities with well pads as close as 300 feet from people's homes. It put in place automatic waivers from even minimal environmental protection standards when it came to fracking. It alleviated the industry of the obligation to notify those on private drinking water wells that their private drinking water had become potentially contaminated by nearby fracking operations. So while fracking was already happening in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if this law had been allowed to go into operation, things would have gotten exponentially worse. Again, the heart of no part of Pennsylvania where the proper shales existed could be left untouched by the fracking industry. I, in my role as the Delaware Riverkeeper, and my organization, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, challenged that law. And the tool we had to challenge it was the constitutional right of the people to pure water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And the long and the short of it is, because of the Constitution, we defeated those devastating aspects of that law and prevented the unleashing of all of that exponential expansion of the industry that would have happened but for our victory. If you heard of the Held v. Montana case, the youth climate litigation, that lawsuit was successful. While similar lawsuits have not been successful, that one was successful because it was grounded in the Montana Green Amendment. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a community forced to live next to a supersaturated toxic site for decades on end once we gave life to Pennsylvania's Green Amendment, was able to grab hold of that Green Amendment and secure action by state government to hold legally responsible corporations obliged to clean up that toxic contamination. And at the same time, they prevented that toxic site from being built, from having over 200 residential homes built on that toxic site while it remained in its toxic condition. The amendment has been used to protect remote natural ecosystems from industrial gold mining operations, and at the same time to protect the last remaining piece of open space in urbanizing communities outside of the city of Philadelphia that would have been sacrificed to unnecessary and unwanted development. So truthfully, the list goes on, and every year we
Sure.
have more successes because of the Green Amendment. Not every legal challenge wins, right? But often they do. And when they win, the accomplishments that are achieved would not have been achieved but for the Green Amendment.
Amazing. Wow. Well, I am catching your passion. I'm excited to work with our network to see how we can show up and make a difference and support the leadership on the ground. I just really want to thank you for joining us and in anticipation of our ongoing relationship, thank you for that as well. Thank our participants tonight. We have two quick closing things. We have obviously a closing prayer, and then a word from our executive director, Michelle. So, Brother Anthony, let me invite you to close us in prayer. I do want to say that Brother Anthony has been a friend to FAN for many years. He was recently just with us at our Franciscan Justice Leadership Conference in October in Washington, D.C., and is also a convener of the Franciscan Justice Circle in New York City. So, brother, please.
Thank you, Nora. And good evening, everyone. We're going to close with the words of Pope Francis from Laudato Si. And this is a prayer, a Christian prayer in union with creation. Let us take a moment to calm ourselves and center ourselves in God. Father, we praise you with all your creatures. They came forth from your all-powerful hand. They are yours, filled with your presence and your tender love. Praise be to you. Son of God, Jesus, through you all things were made. You were formed in the womb of Mary, our mother. You became a part of this earth, and you gazed upon this world with human eyes. Today you are alive in every creature in your risen glory. Praise be to you. Holy Spirit, by your light, you guide this world toward the Father's love, and you accompany creation as it groans in travail. You also dwell in our hearts, and you inspire us to do what is good. Praise be to you. Triune Lord, wondrous community of infinite love, teach us to contemplate you in the beauty of the universe, for all things speak of you. Awaken our praise and thankfulness for every being that you have made. Give us the grace to feel profoundly joined to everything that is. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love for all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. The poor and the earth are crying out, O Lord, Seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. Praise be to you. Amen.
Thank you, Brother Anthony. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Dunn, Executive Director of Franciscan Action Network. First of all, I want to thank Maya Van Rossum for being an amazing panelist tonight. I also want to thank my colleagues, Nora Collins and Sister Louise Lears, for leading our climate work. I wanted to let you know about some upcoming events. 2 weeks from tonight, FAN will hold an Advent prayer service on Zoom, and that will be a special prayer service in solidarity with migrants. It will be called Welcome the Children. So that's Tuesday, December 16th. A couple of weeks after that, on Tuesday, January 6th, FAN will hold its annual Faith in Democracy event. That is the fifth anniversary of the insurrection on January 6th, and we'll be holding what I think will be a fascinating panel discussion about how we, as people of faith, can stand up for democracy at this time as a way to resolve our differences in this country without violence. And then on January 27th, as you've already heard, we will have our next in a series of Green Amendments webinars where we'll really start to dive into what's happening in the states and how you can get involved. Those are all happening on Tuesdays. And by the way, today is Giving Tuesday. I want to say thank you to the many of you who have already donated to FAN on Giving Tuesday. If you haven't had an opportunity to, please, we humbly ask you to consider it. And you will be getting a follow-up email after this webinar with a recording that you can share. And also that will include an invitation link to our next Green Amendments webinar on January 27th. So that's it for tonight. I wish you all a blessed night, a blessed Advent, and peace and all good from the Franciscan Action Network. Good night.